Good morning. It's Ash of A Shared Meditation. We're back reading the appendices, the last two parts of this book, Calming the Fearful Mind, A Zen Response to Terrorism by Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist Vietnamese monk. My friend Thich, he's passed away a few years ago. I'll show you a photo of him. Very good man. If you need someone to research and read about and read the works of, this is the guy I'd point you to. I am spending time reading all of my favorite books of his for YouTube. We've got this one, the second one. The first one I read was No Mud, No Lotus, The Art of Transforming Suffering. And after this book that we're reading, we're also going to dive into Good Citizens and The Art of Communicating. So these are all the works of Thich Nhat Hanh. We also call him by his nickname, Thich. And we're just going to jump right back in. Yesterday we finished chapter 5. Today we're going to read the two different appendices. Thank you guys for joining this morning. If you like having books read to you, go ahead and follow me because I'm going to be spending more time this year reading through all of the books that I read consistently year after year because they're just really great and they make sense of the world and they help me make sense of myself. All right. Appendix 1, Writings on Terrorism. A Prayer, the Best Flowers of Our Practice. This is from a public talk in Berkeley, California, September 13th, 2001. 2 days after the tragedy of September 11th, I offered this talk. Standing together with my community of 80 monks and nuns, we faced an audience of several thousand Americans and offered this prayer for healing and peace. Let us offer humanity the best flowers and fruits of our practice: lucidity, solidity, brotherhood, understanding, and compassion. Breathing in, we are aware that most of us have not been able to overcome the shock. Breathing out, we are aware that there is a tremendous amount of suffering in our country, a tremendous amount of fear, anger, and hatred. But we know deep in our heart that anger and hatred cannot be extinguished with anger and hatred. Responding to hatred with hatred will only cause hatred to multiply 1,000-fold. Only with compassion can we transform hatred and anger. In this very moment, we invoke all of our spiritual teachers, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, to be with us, helping us to embrace the suffering of America as a nation, as a country, to embrace the world as a nation, as a country, to embrace humanity as a family, so that we can become lucid and calm, so that we will know exactly what we should do and what we should not do to avoid making the situation worse. We know that there are those of us who are trying to rescue and to support victims of the destruction, and we are grateful to them. There are those who are dying, who are suffering terribly in this very moment. Let us be there for all of them and embrace them tenderly with all of our compassion, with our understanding, with our awareness. We know that there are many of us who are trying to see to it that the violence will not happen again. We know that responding to hatred and violence with compassion is the only path for all of us. I urge that in these days when we have not yet been able to overcome the tremendous shock, we should not do anything. We should not say anything. We should go home to ourselves and practice mindful breathing and mindful walking to allow ourselves to calm down and to allow lucidity to come so that we can understand the real roots of our suffering and the suffering of the world. Only with that understanding can compassion arise. America can be a great nation if she knows how to act with compassion instead of punishment. We offer this incense to all of our spiritual teachers, and we ask them to support us in this very difficult moment. Cultivating compassion to respond to violence. Statements issued by Thich Nhat Hanh in New York Times, September 18th, 2001. All violence is injustice. Responding to violence with violence is injustice, not only to have the other person, but also to oneself. Responding to violence with violence resolves nothing. It only escalates violence, anger, and hatred. It is only with compassion that we can embrace and disintegrate violence. This is true in relationships between individuals as well as relationships in between nations. Many people in America consider Jesus Christ as their Lord, their spiritual ancestor, and their teacher. We should heed his teachings, especially during critical times like this. Jesus never encourages us to respond to acts of violence with violence. His teaching is, instead, to use compassion to deal with violence. The teachings of Judaism go very much in the same direction. Spiritual leaders of this country are invited to raise their voices to bring about the awareness of this teaching to the American nation and people. What needs to be done right now is to recognize the suffering, to embrace it, and to understand it. We need calmness and lucidity so that we can listen deeply to and understand our own suffering, the suffering of the nation and the suffering of others. By understanding the nature and the causes of the suffering, we will then know the right path to follow. The violence and hatred we presently face has been created by misunderstanding, injustice, discrimination, and despair. We are all co-responsible for making the violence and despair in the world by our way of living, of consuming, and of handling the problems of the world. Understanding why this violence has been created, we will then know what to do and what not to do in order to decrease the level of violence in ourselves and in the world, to create and foster understanding, reconciliation, and forgiveness. I have the conviction that Americans possess enough wisdom and courage to perform an act of forgiveness and compassion, and I know that such an act can bring great relief to America and to the world right away. What I would say to Osama bin Laden. Benefit.com interview, September 2001. If you could speak, this is a question. All right, questions. It's a question and response. Question, if you could speak to Osama bin Laden, what would you say to him? Likewise, if you were to speak to American people, what would you suggest we do at this point individually and as a nation? Tai responded, if we were given to the opportunity to be face-to-face with Osama bin Laden, the first thing I would do is listen. So when we're reading these parts, I want you to use the name Osama bin Laden, interchange that with any other leader present today that, America's dealing with. Like, we're living in crazy times, so I'm pretty sure you'll be able to extrapolate what I'm reading here and apply it to today's world. So just a little note, make sure you're doing this. If given the opportunity to be face-to-face with Osama bin Laden, the first thing I would do is listen. I would try to understand why he had acted in that cruel way. I would try to understand all of the suffering that had led him to violence. It might not be easy to listen to in that way, so I would have to remain calm and lucid. I would need several friends with me who are strong in the practice of deep listening without reacting, without judging and blaming. In this way, an atmosphere of support would be created for this person and those connected so that they could share completely and trust that they are really being heard. After listening for some time, we might need to take a break to allow what has been said to enter into our consciousness. Only when we felt calm and lucid would we respond. We would respond point by point to what he had said. We would respond gently but firmly in such a way as to help them discover their own misunderstandings of their own will. They will stop committing violent acts. For the American people, I would suggest that we do everything we can to restore our calm and our lucidity before responding to the situation. To respond too quickly before we have much understanding of the situation may be very dangerous. The first thing we can do is to cool the flames of anger and hatred that are so strong in us. As mentioned before, it is crucial to look at the way we feed the hatred and violence within us and to take immediate steps to cut off the nourishment of our hatred and violence. When we react out of fear and hatred, we do not yet have a deep understanding of the situation. Our action will only be a very quick and superficial way of responding to the situation and not much true benefit and healing will occur. Yet, if we wait and follow the process of calming our anger, looking deeply into the situation, and listening with great will to understand the roots of suffering, that are the cause of the violent actions. Only then will we have sufficient insight to respond in such a way that healing and reconciliation can be realized for everyone involved. In South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has made attempts to realize this. All the parties involved in violence and injustice agreed to listen to each other in a calm and supportive environment, to look together deeply at the roots of violent acts, and to find some way of making peace. The presence of strong spiritual leaders is very helpful to support and maintain such an environment. We can look at this model for resolving conflicts that are arising right in the present moment. We do not have to wait many years to realize this. Question. You personally experienced the devastation caused by the war fought in Vietnam, and you worked to the end of hostilities there. What do you say to people who are grief-stricken and enraged because they have lost loved ones in the terrorist attack? Tai responded, I did lose my spiritual sons and daughters during the Vietnam War when they entered the fighting zone trying to save those under the bombs. Some were murdered because of this misunderstanding that they were supporting the other side. When I looked at the slain corpses of my spiritual children, I suffered deeply. I understand the suffering of those who have lost beloved ones in this tragedy. In situations of great loss and grief, I had to find my calm in order to restore my lucidity and my heart of understanding and compassion. With the practice of deep looking, I realized that if we respond to cruelty with cruelty, injustice and suffering will only increase. When the village of Ben Tre, a village in Vietnam, was bombed and 300,000 homes were destroyed, the pilots told journalists that they had destroyed the village in order to save it. I was shocked and angry when I heard this. I practiced walking calmly and gently on the earth to bring back my calm mind and peaceful heart. Although it was very challenging to maintain my openness in such moments, it was crucial not to respond in any way until I had calmness and clarity about the situation. To respond with violence and hatred would only damage myself and those around me. All of us practice looking deeply into the suffering of the people inflicting violence on us. To understand them more deeply and to understand ourselves more deeply. With this understanding, we were able to produce compassion and to relieve our own suffering and that of the other side. One moment. All right. Question. What is the right action to take with regard to responding to terrorist attacks? Should we seek justice through military action, through judicial action processes? Is military action and/or retaliation justified if it can prevent future innocents from being killed? Thai's response. All violence is injustice. The fire of hatred and violence cannot be extinguished by adding more hatred and violence to the fire. The only antidote to violence is compassion. And what is compassion made of? It is made of understanding. When there is no understanding, how can we feel compassion? How can we begin to relieve the great suffering that is there? So understanding is the very real foundation upon which we build our compassion. How do we gain the understanding and insight to guide us through such incredibly challenging moments that we now face in America? To understand, we must find paths of communication so that we can listen to those who desperately are calling out for our understanding, because such an act of violence is a desperate call for attention and for help. How can we listen in a calm and clear way so that we don't immediately kill the chance for understanding to develop? As a nation, we need to look into this, how to create the situations for deep listening to occur so that our response to the situation may arise out of our calm and clear mind. Clarity is a great offering that we can make at this time. There are people who want one thing only, revenge. In the Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha said that by using hatred to answer hatred, there would only be an escalation of hatred. But if we use compassion to embrace those who have harmed us, it will greatly diffuse the bomb in our hearts and in theirs. So how can we bring about a drop of compassion that can put out the fire of hatred? You know, they do not sell compassion in the supermarket. If they sold compassion, we would only need to bring it home, and we could solve the problem of hatred and violence in the world very easily. But compassion can only be produced in our own hearts by our own practice. America is burning with hatred. We have to tell our friends, you are children of Christ, of Muhammad, of Moses, and of the Buddha. You have to return to yourselves and look deeply and find out why this violence happened. Why is there so much hatred? What lies under all this violence? Why do they hate so much that they should sacrifice their own lives and bring about so much suffering to other people? Why would these young people, full of vitality and strength, have chosen to lose their lives to commit such violence? This is what we have to understand. We have to find a way to stop violence, of course. If need be, we have to put the men responsible in prison. But the important thing is to look deeply and ask, why did that happen? What responsibility do we have in that happening? Maybe they misunderstood us. But what has made them misunderstand us so much to make them hate us so much? The method of the Buddha is to look deeply, to see the source of suffering, the source of violence. If we have violence within ourselves, any action can make that violence explode. This energy of hatred and violence can be very great, and when we see that in the other person, then we feel sorry for them. When we feel sorry for them, the drop of compassion is born in our hearts, and we feel so much happier and so much more at peace in ourselves. That's an interesting take. That produces the nectar of compassion within ourselves. I personally don't understand the part of needing to feel sorry for someone. I don't think the sensation of feeling sorry is what understanding is. I think you can feel the other person's intention, and that alone is understanding. All right. If you come to the monastery, and I might be wrong on that, just so you know. If you come to the monastery, it is in order to learn how to look deeply, so that whenever you suffer and feel angry, the drop of compassion in your heart can come out and can put out the fever of anger. Only the drop of compassion can put out the flames of hatred. We must look deeply and honestly at our present situation. If we are able to see the sources of suffering within ourselves and within the other person, we can begin to unravel the cycle of hatred and violence. When our house is on fire, we must first put out the fire before investigating its cause. Likewise, if we first distinguish the anger and hatred in our own heart, we will have the chance to deeply investigate the situation with clarity and insight in order to determine all of the causes and conditions that have contributed to the hatred and violence we are experiencing within ourselves and within our world. The right action is the action that results in the fires of hatred and violence being extinguished. Question: do you believe that evil exists? And if so, do you consider terrorists to be evil persons? Tai responded, evil exists. God also exists. Evil and God are two sides of ourselves. God is the great understanding and great love within us. That is what we call Buddha, also, the enlightened mind that is able to see through all ignorance. What is evil? It is when the face of God, the face of the Buddha within us, has become hidden. It is up to us to choose whether the evil side becomes more important or whether the side of God and the Buddha shines out. Although the side of great ignorance of evil may be manifesting strongly at one time, that does not mean that God is not there. It is said clearly in the Bible, "Forgive them, for they not know what they do." This means that an act of evil is an act of great ignorance and misunderstanding. Perhaps many wrong perceptions are behind an act of evil. We have to see what ignorance and misunderstanding, we have to see that ignorance and misunderstanding are the root of evil. Every human being contains within him or herself all the elements of great understanding, great compassion, and also ignorance, hatred, and violence. Question. In your book, Anger, you give an example of compassionate listening as a tool to heal families. Can that tool be used on a national level? And if so, how would that work? Oh, thank you so much, Kayla. Thank you for joining us. This past summer, a group of Palestinians and Israelis came to Plum Village, the practice center where I live in southern France, to learn and practice the art of deep listening and loving speech. Around 1,600 people came to Plum Village each summer from over a dozen countries to listen and to learn how to bring peace and understanding to their daily lives. The group of Palestinians and Israelis participated in the daily schedule of walking meditation, sitting meditation, and silent meals. They also received training on how to listen and speak to each other in such a way that more understanding and peace could be possible between them as individuals and as nations. With the guidance and support of the monks and nuns, they sat down and listened to each other. When one person spoke, no one interrupted him or her. Everyone practiced mindfulness of their breathing and listening in such a way that the other person felt heard and understood. When a person spoke, they refrained from using the words of blame, hatred, and condemnation. They spoke in an atmosphere of trust and respect. From these dialogues, the participating Palestinians and Israelis realized that both sides suffer from fear. They appreciated the practice of deep listening and made arrangements to share what they learned with others upon returning to their home countries. We recommended that the Palestinians and Israelis talked about their suffering, fears, and despair in a public forum that all the world could hear. We could all listen without judging, without condemning, in order to understand the experiences of both sides. This would prepare the ground of understanding for peace talks to occur. The same situation now exists between the American people and the people of Islamic and Arabic nations. There is much misunderstanding. The lack of communication hinders our ability to resolve our difficulties peacefully. I feel like this is so true. If we listen, we could connect. I 100% believe that, Kayla. I totally believe that. If you're interested in what you're hearing, this book is called Calming the Fearful Mind, A Zen Response to Terrorism by Thich, Nhat, Hanh. You'll find this on YouTube under Asheric Meditation, ASHERIC. So I'm uploading these lives there so that people can listen to the entirety of the book. And this book speaks so true to today's world. And it's why I felt called to read and share it. He's got many more books that are fantastic reads to understand today's world and to work your way through it. No Mud, No Lotus, The Art of Transforming Suffering. And this is, you can see his name there, Thich Nhat Hanh. And then we're going to do, that one's already on YouTube. And then we're going to do Good Citizens, Creating an Enlightened Society. And then The Art of Communicating. Really good books. Awesome. You're so welcome. These books, I adore these books. I read all of them at least once a year. And they're nice and short and easy to get through. All right. And we left off here. Question. Compassion is a very large part of Buddhism and Buddhist practice. But at this point in time, compassion towards terrorists seems impossible to muster. Is it realistic to think people can feel true compassion now? Tai responded, without understanding, compassion is impossible. When you understand the suffering of others, you do not have to force yourself to feel compassion. The door to your heart will just naturally open. All of the hijackers were so young, and yet they sacrificed their lives for what? Why did they do that? What kind of deep suffering is there? It will require deep listening and deep looking to understand that. To have compassion in this situation is to perform a great act of forgiveness. We can first embrace the suffering, both outside of America and within America. We need to look after the victims here within our country, and also to have compassion for the hijackers and their families, because they are also victims of ignorance and hatred. In this way, we can truly practice non-discrimination. We do not need to wait many years or decades to realize reconciliation and forgiveness. We need a wake-up call now in order not to allow hatred to overwhelm our hearts. Question: do you believe things happen for a reason? If so, what was the reason for the attacks on the United States? Tai answered, the deep reason for our current situation is our patterns of consumption. U.S. citizens consume 60% of the world's energy resources, yet they account for only 6% of the world's total population. Children in America have witnessed 100,000 acts of violence on television by the time they finish elementary school. Another reason for our current situation is our foreign policy and the lack of deep listening within our relationships. We do not use deep listening to understand the suffering and the real needs of people in other nations. Question: what do you think would be the most effective spiritual response to this tragedy? Tai responded, we can begin right now to practice calming our anger, looking deeply at the root of hatred and violence in our society and in our world, and listening with compassion in order to hear and understand what we have not yet had the capacity to hear and to understand. When the drop of compassion begins to form in our hearts and minds, we begin to develop concrete responses to our situation. When we have listened and looked deeply, we may begin to develop the energy of brotherhood and sisterhood between all nations, which is the deepest spiritual heritage of all our religious and cultural traditions. In this way, the peace and understanding within the whole world is increased day by day. To develop the drop of compassion in our own heart is the only effective spiritual response to hatred and violence. That drop of compassion will be the result of calming our anger, looking deeply at the roots of our own violence, deep listening, and understanding the suffering of everyone involved in the acts of hatred and violence. Hello, Rich. Thank you so much for the likes. That was Appendix 1 of Calming the Fearful Mind, a Zen Response to Terrorism by Thich, Nhat, Hanh. We have one more appendix, one more part to read. And this one it's long enough to be a read tomorrow. I've been doing section by section a little bit each day. So I think I'm going to do the last part tomorrow morning. I'm going to upload what we just read over onto YouTube. So if you want to listen to the entirety of today's part, or if you want to find chapters 1 through 5, you can find it on my YouTube, which is Asheric Meditation, ASHERIC Meditation. All right, thank you guys so much for tuning in with me and for listening to the book. Again, this is one of my favorite teachers. And after this one, we'll have 2 more to read through. So thank you so much. There, if you need more listening content, there's a few hours over there. And the YouTube, again, Kayla, thank you so much for asking, is Asheric Meditation. So it's like my name hyphenated, or it's not hyphenated, but squished together. ASHERIC, Asheric Meditation. And thank you so much. You can also find on my profile, I've got a link to my YouTube. Perfect. Thank you so much, Kayla. And I'll give you a follow back. Thank you so much. Ta-da! Follow back. I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in with me. Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a fantastic afternoon, and I will be back tomorrow morning to read that last part of the book. All right. Have a great